How companies navigate the technology world to gain competitive advantage is the defining business challenge of our time. Just like the riddle of the Sphinx, you have to decipher it to avoid being devoured. The good news is that the path to successful digital transformation exists. And it's well documented in a new book called Rewired, the McKinsey Guide to Outcompeting in the Age of Digital and AI. Based on more than 200 digital transformations at large companies worldwide, the authors describe 6 critical enterprise capabilities for digital transformations and explain step by step how to execute them. Rewired and its emblematic cases are the topics of today's conversation. So, welcome to McKinsey Talks. I'm Mariana Almeida, and here with me at the McKinsey studio in São Paulo is Eric Lamar. He's a senior partner in Boston, leader of McKinsey Digital in North America, and co-author of the book. Heitor Martins is also our guest today. He's a senior partner here in São Paulo, leader of new business, and founder of McKinsey Digital in Latin America. So welcome, Eric and Heitor. It's such a pleasure to have you here today.
Hello. Thank you for having us.
Hello, Mariana. Great to be back here.
Great to have you back again.
Thank you.
So let's start. Eric, to set the baseline here, what is digital transformation? And more important, what is not?
Yes, that's a great place to start. Let's start with what it's not. I think it's not viewing a digital transformation as just the implementation of technologies and then after a few years we're done. We're actually never done. And so what matters is the underlying capabilities that an organization builds so that it can continuously innovate with digital and AI. And this is a little bit the reason for the title of this book. Rewired really gets at this notion that what matters at the end of the day are those underlying capabilities so that, for the next 10, 20 years longer, you can continuously innovate and stay ahead in terms of the customer experience and the unit cost of the company.
It involves the whole organization.
Absolutely. It does involve the entire organization. And there's a tendency to think it's a little bit of a pocket, a sidecar to the organization, which does a lot of innovative stuff. But those who do this well really embeds this in the core. And every business leader becomes capable of using the tools of digital and AI to improve their business. And so, yes, it is enterprise-wide.
Okay. So, Eric, as you said, as I just explained, transformations are less about technology and more about changes. And as you said, rewiring the organizations. Do CEOs understand this message? And what do you hear from them?
I think it's a mixed bag, to be honest. I think some CEOs are hoping that this is going to be quick. So I assign it to my head of IT, and I ask him or her to, conduct a digital transformation, and hopefully it's not too much work, and we'll be done with it in a couple of years. And I would say that category probably does not fully get it yet. But there's certainly a lot today that I've realized that this is going to require real work by the top team, not just the CEO, by the way. Everybody plays a new role. The head of HR needs to recruit different talent. The head of finance needs to think about funding differently. The head of risk management needs to do their job differently. The heads of business unit also. And so everybody has a different role to play in this transformation, but it has to start with obviously the CEO leading it, the top team playing differently, and them coming together with a vision of where they want to go. And so the head of technology of IT obviously also plays an important role, but he or she is not alone.
But when you first come to the organization, is it clear to them, or is it more usual that they don't know and you have to explain the whole process?
It's a great question. In many instances, when they start on the journey, as a top team, they'll be at different place in terms of their understanding of digital and AI. And so there's usually what I like to call a go slow to go fast. So align a little bit the top team on what does a data engineer do? What is agile? What is a data architecture looking like? And there's kind of a basic level of understanding of technology. which doesn't have to be that complicated, but at least we should have the same words in our mind when we talk about this topic. And so a little bit of alignment on the 101, the fundamentals, and also some visits to others that have actually gone further down the journey, more to build the confidence of the team that this can be done. These other companies weren't necessarily in a better starting position, but they made it through. And so building the confidence of the team that they can actually lead their organization to success is also another important, building block. So yes, there is time up front that needs to be invested to build that alignment.
Right. And Heitor, how about you here in Latin America? What do you see here?
You cannot be more right when you say that this is not about actually the technology, it's about the organization. In my experience with clients, I think there are three fundamental challenges that clients have a lot of difficulty grasping with. The first one is actually putting the client at the center and thinking through the products and the processes with the eyes of the client. It's very difficult. The second one is actually getting different parts of the organization, different silos, to actually work together to deliver new products, new processes in a better way to the client. And I think the third one is actually the ability to embrace and incorporate ideas and innovation that comes from all across the organization, okay, and not through a top-down perspective. Those are three unlocks that to me are fundamental, and the technology is actually the enabler for that and the turbocharger of that. But in the end, it's about the three main organizational questions.
Yes, I think you're so right. We rarely find a few years in that the challenge was a technological one. There's a great example that we describe in the book, this company called Freeport-McMoRan. It's a mining company.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It deploys some AI-based technology to increase the throughput of their facilities. But at the end of the day, what was the biggest challenge is actually to get the frontline operators to change how they were going to work with technology so that they could actually run their operations differently. And that change management process, but also, as Heitor is saying, getting the input of those individuals back into the development of the AI and the overlying solutions behind this was critical. And it's never just technologists alone. It's never just business alone. It's never just operations alone. It's actually when you bring these people together, you get to a really good solution that is fit for purpose, not just technology for technology's sake, but technology that gets used.
Exactly. And what was the most emblematic, you just mentioned one case, but what was the most emblematic or even curious case that you dealt with? Or many of them, two of them? Or...
There are many of them, but I come back to one of my first one. I guess the first one tend to leave the strongest impression. I was working with a large international bank almost a decade ago. Mm-hmm. This was the very beginning of digital transformations in banking. And I remember we were developing fantastic apps for the customer to be able to do their banking online. And we do that today, and that seems straightforward. But back then, it wasn't, when everything was based on core systems and digital apps were just starting. Anyway, so, the technology gets developed, customers are happy, we're making it easier for them. And then the CEO, after a couple of years, says, that's all great, but where are all the productivity gains that I was promised? Because I don't see them. And he was right. And the reason why the productivity gains weren't showing up is because one part of the organization was developing great technology for customers, but the other part of the organization, the more traditional distribution, branches and contact centers, were not readjusting. Mm-hmm. And essentially scaling down because a lot more of the customers now were going through the digital channel. And it taught me a very important lesson. When you do digital and AI, you really need to take an end-to-end system view. Otherwise, you're optimizing one part, but you're not actually capturing the benefits that are showing up somewhere else. And that, in every transformation that I have done, that lesson has come back. Whether it's banking or airlines or agriculture, And so this notion of an end-to-end system view and optimizing that versus a narrow solution is one of the biggest lessons I've learned.
So everyone has to be aligned.
Everybody has to be aligned, and someone at the top of this needs to actually see the big picture and be able to do these optimization and these arbitrages.
Okay. And Heitor, you are one of the pioneers here at McKinsey Digital Practice in Latin America and have helped countless organizations in this field. How do you see the evolution of digital transformations here in Brazil? And Eric, I think, I have the impression that you talked about banking, so I think it's maybe one of the most mature sectors, but I don't know, how do you see here in Latin America this evolution?
I think Latin America in general, Brazil, are particularly prone to digital transformation. Because you have two things in this market that are very favorable. On one hand, you have scale and institutions with a lot of investment capabilities and depth of talent. No? And on the other hand, you have a market, that is small enough that companies can actually embrace it. No? So this creates this, it's the right size to innovate in a sense. It's very hard to innovate in the US because the market is huge and it's very fragmented. It takes a long time to transform the US market. Other smaller places, they lack the scale to justify the investment. Brazil is kind of in the sweet spot. And we've seen that over and over with with incumbents transforming, and some of our banks are at the forefront of digital transformation worldwide. Also through the startups that gain scale and the large number of unicorns that we see in this market. So I think this topic is particularly relevant for our region.
I would agree with that. Just coming from another region of McKinsey, we do look up to the cases that are based out of Latin America and Brazil and other geographies. So there is a certain level of innovativeness here that I guess goes outside of the region and inspires others.
I'm going to build on Eric's example of banking. I also work in the banking sector. And I have a client who has been engaged for many, many years in digital transformation, in transforming the business. And it's very interesting. When they started maybe 15, 20 years ago, their IT budget was around 5% of revenues. Nowadays, this IT budget is more than around 12% of revenues, so it has more than doubled. No? And the share of technology employees in the organization has shifted from maybe 6-7% to today almost 25% of the workforce are comprised of technology people. That's a fundamental change in the organization. And this all happened in a time span where the total number of employees actually decreased by 30%. So this gives you an idea of the shift that happens in the workforce, the way you do processes, where is your talent, where your talent is focused. Now you see all that actually playing on. It's very exciting times to see those changes.
Yeah. Let me build on this now that we're staying on banking for a little while. I think it's an interesting industry because, in my opinion, banks tended to be the first ones down this digital transformation path a decade ago. So it's interesting to look back now. What happened after 10 years? And the book opens on this in the introduction and looks at 80 banks globally. And we benchmark these banks and we look at their progressions. And we separate them between the 20 that are digital leaders and the 20 that are digital laggers. So first quartile and fourth quartile. And we look at their performance over that time period. And the digital leaders do an outstanding job at injecting technology throughout their end-to-end process. Their talent mix changes, like Heitor just mentioned. And at the end of the day, total return to shareholders, growth, operating leverage, every single metric you can look at for that group of digital leaders versus lagger is substantially better. And almost to the point where you go, After 10 years, if you did not invest in building your capabilities as a bank, it's going to be really hard to catch up. Because it's a compounding effect. You get better. Next week, you're a little better. The week after, you're a little better. Well, after 5 years, 10 years, you're starting to actually see a trajectory of improvement that is hard to catch up.
And if you don't do it, it's hard to thrive.
If you don't do it, it's hard to thrive. And I think if I were a little provocative, you're risking game over because the level of financial outperformance and customer outperformance that you're getting from those that have really made that investment in underlying capabilities is phenomenal. And so the competitive disadvantage that you're creating for your company, if you haven't built those capabilities, it's going to be hard to.
Is the new natural selection here?
New natural selection. That's a great way to put it.
As you said, maybe can we say for sure that banking is the more mature sector in digital transformation?
I think retail was also very fast. But yes, if I compare to consumer packaged goods, that was a little later. Mining, that was a little later. And so, of course, it varies around the world. But in general, I would say yes, the banks were very early on. And it makes sense, right? I mean, you're offering essentially a digital product or, a product that's not a physical product. And so and banks were always very IT intensive. And it has increased, as Heitor has said, but technology was already central to the model.
I would actually add media. Media is also a sector that was fundamentally transformed by digital over the last 20 years. No?
So Eric, Rewired, based on experiences from over 200 digital transformations around the world, as we just said, of the 6 common elements you identified, which is the most challenging? And in which of them companies are more mature? We discussed some of them, but I don't know if you have comparing the 6 of them, if you have one that stands out.
Yes, I do. And it's the first one that's presented in the book, and the first one that tends to need to fall in place when you do a digital transformation. And it's this alignment of business leadership around what we call the value roadmap in the book. And so it's this idea of saying, where exactly will technology make breakthrough improvements in the way that I run my business? So if I'm a mining company, it may be in the way that I run, throughput and yield in my operations, and that's what I want to optimize. If it's a bank, it might be the customer experience, but it's deciding up front how are we going to transform not the entire company at once, because that's not possible, but also not a tiny solutions that's not going to make a difference. So an end-to-end journey, an end-to-end process. And that alignment takes time because the business leaders have to actually say, that's how I'm running today, and this is how I'm going to run in the future. They have to conceptualize how this is going to work. They have to figure out where will the different technology pieces come together. It's never one technology. It's always a family of solutions that need to be weaved together and actually get to a really good outcome. They have to put a dollar value on this. What's the value of doing all of this? How much investments are we going to need? And so there's a level of alignment up front. That's the most important piece. If that piece doesn't go well, it doesn't matter what you do afterwards.
So Eric, could you recap the other 5 elements?
The first one is what I've just described, this value roadmap. The next 4 really address the core delivery capability. So the roadmap says, this is where I want to go. The next 4 is basically tooling yourself so that you can deliver on it. And so we're talking about talent. We're talking about operating model. How will business tech operations work together more closely to deliver? We're talking about the technology stack. So how am I going to make technology easy to use in my organization so that they can innovate? And last one is data, of course. So making data easy to consume. So those are the 4 around delivery. And then the last one, the 6th, is a non-tech aspect. It's this notion of adoption and scaling. So how do I make sure that whatever I'm developing actually gets used? Back to my example of operators in in a mining facility and making sure that they adopt the technology. And so this notion of adoption of the technology and being able to scale it across the organization so that it's not just used in one place, but in many places. So it could be many countries, for example, if you're scaling the technology. So alignment on the roadmap, 4 core delivery capabilities, and the last one, making sure the last mile change management gets done so you have adoption and scaling.
Okay. And the book was concepted, first of all, it was like a playbook, not a book. So why is it important today for every CEO or every businessman to read it?
It's true. We never actually intended to write a book. This started in 2017, and it was more a search for the recipe. We figured there's got to be some companies that do this well. So let's just go and start to investigate and draw back what seemed to be the best practices. And that became, in 2017, it became known internally at McKinsey as Playbook version 1.0. And then every 18 months, we updated that 2.0, 2.0, 3.0, 4.0. And then about a year ago, we said, okay, we have something to say here that's important. Many companies could benefit from this. And so we decided to actually write this book. And it essentially is more or less 5 or 6 years of lessons learned, examining these companies and updating our playbook as we went along.
Eric, I have a question to you. Over the last 6 months, generative AI caught a lot of attention, caught the imagination of all of us and every CEO.
Yes.
How does that impact the messages that are on the book, if at all? No?
Beautiful question. It's funny because we managed in the book to include a short section on generative AI because generative AI popped up on all of us, and then
1 year ago. So
and then the book was going to production, and then we said, "Oh my God, we got to write something about generative AI." And clearly, our thinking was just emerging back then, and it'll get better over time. But to your question, Heitor, I actually think generative AI, just like AI, by the way, traditional AI or analytic AI, draws on exactly the same foundational capabilities that I spoke about. You need to figure out, how am I going to transform an end-to-end journey or an end-to-end process with generative AI? You still need the same delivery capabilities that I spoke about, perhaps fine-tuned for the new skill set specific to generative AI. And so it's, I like to say that as a company, if you were not good at AI or digital before, because you didn't have the capabilities that I spoke about, you're not going to be good at generative AI. Generative AI is going to require the same amount of capabilities, if not more, to deliver production scale applications that are customized for the companies. And so I think that's just, building on a set of capabilities that are critical. Let me give you a concrete example. If you are doing a generative AI application, you obviously now need to pull a lot of unstructured data together. That's super heavy in terms of data engineering. If you were doing AI before and you had built that capability, you reapply it. Data engineering is something that is a core skill set that you would have built anyway. Cloud engineering, being able to actually do your technology stack on the cloud, your data on the cloud, well, you would have done that before. That's another capability that you would have reapplied. The ability to think through the change management when you're implementing a technology solution. If you were doing it before, you'll reapply it. And so a lot of the core capability sets that made a difference to traditional analytically based AI is going to be also central to GenAI. Now, there will be a few additions. We're talking a lot about prompt engineering, the skill set to actually figure out how to decipher the intent in a question. Those will be add-ons to the capability set, but the core of it will be what was already there. And so back to where I was a minute ago, if you were not good at AI before, I think it's a pipe dream to think you're going to be good at GenAI. There's a set of foundational capabilities that are still needed.
Perfect. So Eric and Heitor, before we close, what is the final message you would like to leave for our audience? So if you can start, Eric.
The core message I'd like to leave is really back to the title of this book, Rewired. And to think about this as the building up of organizational capabilities. And so if you're leading a company today, ask yourself, am I leading my peers or am I lagging? And how good are my underlying capabilities so that my organization can continuously innovate? And I might offer, take the 6 capabilities that are in the book and do a little bit of a self-check. Where are we on this? Are we good? Are we not good on this dimension? Because I think it's going to start there. After that, what are the specific technologies implemented here and there? They will change. But the underlying capabilities won't. They're going to stay with you for, I keep telling executives, you will be doing this for the rest of your careers. Every executive today. So for the next 10, 20 years, that's what we're going to be doing, essentially injecting technology to make businesses run better.
And I would say the opportunity for doing that in Latin America and in Brazil is just right there. We have all the right conditions, the right scale, so we should seize the opportunity.
Great, so let's take it.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much, Eric and Heitor. It was such a pleasure, as I said in the beginning, to have you here. It was a very rich conversation here that we had.
Fantastic moment together. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for being here with us today. Do you want to know more about Rewired or contact our experts? So email us at McKinsey_talks@mckinsey.com. You can also check out this episode and previous ones visiting our website. The link is in the description of this episode. So thank you very much and see you soon.